डियर स्टूडेंट्स, आज हम ECB 401 इंडियन इकोनॉमिक पॉलिसी की सेकेंड यूनिट का नेक्स्ट टॉपिक स्टडी करने जा रहे हैं। इससे पहले हमने ये पढ़ा था कि एग्रीकल्चरल प्रोडक्ट्स की जो प्राइसेस होती हैं वो कैसे रेगुलेट एंड कंट्रोल होती हैं थ्रू पॉलिसीज़, गवर्नमेंट पॉलिसीज़। ओके, देन लेट अस स्टार्ट द नेक्स्ट टॉपिक, कमर्शलाइजेशन ऑफ एग्रीकल्चर। एग्रीकल्चर का कमर्शलाइजेशन कैसे हुआ, देन कमर्शलाइजेशन जो हुआ उसका क्या इफ़ेक्ट हुआ एग्रेरियन प्रोडक्ट्स पे या एग्रीकल्चर पे या फार्मर्स पे, क्या इसका पॉजिटिव एंड नेगेटिव इफ़ेक्ट हुआ। लेट अस स्टार्ट। सो पहले हम ये जानने की कोशिश करते हैं व्हाट इज़ कमर्शलाइजेशन। Commercialization of agriculture is mainly a process of production of cash crops. A cash crop is simply a crop produced for sale. Second, agricultural commercialization can be defined as the proportion of agricultural production that is marketed. Third, commercialization of agriculture involves moving from subsistence-oriented patterns to increasingly market-oriented patterns. The underlying assumptions behind this shift is that markets allow households to increase their incomes by producing those commodities that generate the highest returns and then use the cash to buy household consumption items. Next is recent trends in globalization of smallholder agriculture, including connecting smallholder farmers with domestic and international market chains, is a clear indication that commercialization of smallholder agriculture will continue to increase in the developing world. Commercialization of smallholder agriculture by bringing the resource-poor farmers to markets is not entirely a new phenomenon. Many agricultural processes have been implemented in developing countries for production of cash crops. Provides a few examples in the context of commercialization in developing countries in agricultural development. First is Hanapi and Sons enterprise for rice production in Malaysia. This enterprise specializes in mill polished rice, bran, very fine rice, broken rice and husk from paddy. Second example is Corn Products Corporation International Enterprise for maize production in Kenya and Pakistan. This enterprise converts maize to starch, sweeteners, oil and gluten feed and flour for livestock. There are so many examples, etc. Now, let us discuss about what are the pattern of consumption. Commercialization of agriculture leads to change in the consumption pattern, like gradual shift from food grain towards high value commodities. Second, consumption pattern changes from cereals to high value commodities. Change in consumption pattern gets influenced by a large number of socio-cultural, economic, environmental and geographical factors. In support the view that dietary habits change from staple food crops like wheat, rice and other cereals to high value diet like fruits and vegetables. In Indian context, the commercial crops, the likes of cotton, tobacco and sugarcane were grown fairly extensively even before the British took over the Indian state. This was so because the revenue had to pay in cash and the price of these crops were high as compared to other consumable grains. Hence, we can conclude that commercialization of agriculture at that time corresponded only to the requirements of traditional revenue economy, in which the main form of revenue payable was an indistinguishable amalgamate of tax, tribute and field rent. Qualitative changes due to the commercialization of agriculture. From the time of Industrial Revolution, a new international specialization began to emerge as a result of trade. India specialized in agricultural exports. In turn, Changes in the product market induced changes in land, labor, and credit markets. Then let us discuss what are the process of commercialization. The commercialization of India agriculture was initiated in Indian by the British through their direct and indirect policies and activities. The new land tenure system introduced in form of Jamindari, Mahalwari and Rayatwari had made agriculture land a freely exchangeable commodity. Next, the agriculture, which had been way of life rather than a business enterprise, now with the introduction of permanent settlements began to the practice for sale in national and international market. Moreover, crops like cotton, jute, sugarcane, groundnuts, tobacco, etc., which had a high demand in the market, were increasingly cultivated. Now, what are the factors affecting commercialization of agriculture products? Deliberate policy worked under pressure from British manufacturer, industrialists and merchants to acquire raw materials for British industries. Industrial revolution necessitated commercialization of agriculture, mounting demands of revenue by the state and excessive rent by the landlords from peasantry. The expansion of the railways facilitated the commercialization of agriculture. Railways linked the interiors of the country with ports and harbors and urban market centers. Indian agriculture began to produce for world market. Wheat from Punjab, jute from Bengal and cotton from Bombay. The opening of Suez Canal in 1869 shortened the sea route between England and India by about 3,000 miles and brought the two countries closer to each other for purpose of trade. Certain technologies innovation in England between 1873 and 1886 replaced sailing vessels with modern steamships. This brought down the freight rates by half and had a stimulating effect on the export of agriculture produce from India. The Civil War in North America diverted, for the time being, the British demand for raw cotton from the United States to India. Consequently, there was a sudden increase in the export of raw cotton from India. The result of all these was increase in export of agricultural goods from India. Now, before 1991, we discuss what are the conditions before 1991. Largest employer, more than 80% population doing agriculture related activity. Use of primitive and traditional methods period to mid-1960s. Initiatives like the Green Revolutions, Yellow Revolution, Operation Flood, Blue Revolution, etc. These initiatives introduced HYV seeds, modern irrigation facilities like tube wells, etc. Use of fertilizers and pesticides instead of manure was introduced. The policy used by government was that of protectionism. Thus, the government introduced high tariffs on imports of agro-based products, except for the imports made for cultivation. There were also various subsidies provided for by the government. Seeds were provided to farmers in regulated market at a lower price. This ensured fairness in the process of provision of seeds and also ensured the quality of the food grains. Fertilizers and pesticides were also provided at a cheap and subsidized rate. Infrastructure for irrigation was provided by the government itself. If not so, it ensured that the said item was provided at a subsidized rate. Also, the farmers were able to avail low interest loans from the government banks to finance their various costs. Then, now we discuss about liberalization and agrarian crisis. In general, liberalization refers to a relaxation of previous government restrictions. Usually in such areas of social, political and economic policy, in some contexts, this process or concept is often but not always referred to as deregulation. Economic liberalization is the lessening of government regulations and restriction in an economy in exchange for greater participation by private entities. The doctrine is associated with classical liberalism. Thus, liberalism, in short, is the removal of control in order to encourage economic development. The economic crisis of 1994, the government of reconsidered its economic policy to save the country from economic meltdown and to be declared a defaulter in the international market. The policy of liberalization, privatization and globalization not only affected the largely secondary and tertiary sector of the country but also the primary sector, which comprised mainly of the agriculture sector and other agro-based sectors and industries. Actual declines in central government revenue expenditure on rural development, cuts in particular subsidies such as on fertilizer in real terms, and the overall decline in per capita government expenditure on rural areas. Reduction in public investment in agriculture, including in research and extension. Very substantial declines in public energy investment that affect the rural areas, including in irrigation. Reduced spread and rising prices of the public distribution system for food. This has a substantial adverse effect on rural household food consumption in most part of the country. Financial liberalization measures, including redefining priority sector lending by banks, which effectively reduced the availability of rural credit and thus made farm investment more expensive and more difficult, especially for smaller farmers. Liberalization and removal of restriction on internal trade in agriculture commodities across states within India. Liberalization of external trade. First, though lifting restriction on exports of agriculture goods, and then by shifting from quantitative restriction to tariffs on imports of agricultural commodities. Agriculture sector is the mainstay of the rural Indian economy, around with social economic privileges and deprivation revolve, and any change in its structure is likely to have a corresponding impact on the existing pattern of social equality. No strategy of economic reform can succeed without sustained and broad-based agricultural development, which is critical for raising living standards, alleviating poverty, assuring food security, generating buoyant market for expansion of industry and services, and making substantial contribution to the national economic growth. Now, we discuss what is the meaning of agrarian crisis. In 1966, when the Green Revolution started, then agriculture production increased rapidly. The major credit for this goes to the strategy of Green Revolution, in which inputs like irrigation, chemical fertilizer, HYV seeds were used intensively. After 1965, it is accepted that agricultural development looks place successfully. According to that, some economists, it's called second phase of agricultural development. This period is from 1965 to 85. After 1985, the Green Revolution started slowing up. Along with this, the process of economic reference had also started by stealth. As a result, industrial development was emphasized at the cost of agricultural development. However, the situation was not serious till 2002. Data shows us that in January 2002, we had 58 million tons surplus stock of food grains. However, in recent years, it has been seen that the agricultural growth rate has become less than 2%. The declaration in agricultural growth in 1990s is known as agrarian crisis. The reason for agrarian crisis and the causes of agrarian crisis, that are the same topic. Now, what are the causes of agrarian crisis? As such, the economic reforms of 1991 had a large impact on the Indian agricultural sector. The new liberal and north-centric economic reforms have already devastatingly impacted on the Indian people and society. The new economic policies in India have directly brought about a serious crisis in Indian agriculture. Agriculture growth declined from 3.4% in the 1980s to 3% in the 1990s. What is significant is that in the post-reform period, it declined from 4.7% of the 8th plan period to 1.8% in the 9th plan period. The regulated market for distribution of seeds were handed to private sector. This led to a substantial increase in the price of seeds and also an increase in the selling of spurious seeds. Poor peasants continued to remain outside the fold of the banking system in the post-reform period. In fact, the growth rate of agricultural credit for small and marginal farmers declined in the 1990s as compared with the 1980s. As a result of accumulating debts on small farmers, which drove them into a debt trap. Many of them committed suicide, with 221 deaths reported in the state of Andhra Pradesh alone in 1993 to 94, with nationwide deaths of close to 1,000. The food crop area and non-food crop area in India were 70.34 and 29.66%. respectively in 1981 to 82 by 1998 to 99. Food crops area got reduced to 65.44% and non-food crop area was enhanced to 34.6%. Lack of proper education related to markets and unorganized markets make farmers susceptibility towards being cheated. Hoarding, corruption, privatization and unethical practices cause a loss to farmers as they are paid less amount than the MSP, even after strict guidelines from the government. Lack of loan facilities from commercial banks make farmers take a loan from money lenders at high rates. This drives them into a debt trap if they are not able to repay the loans and is the number of one cause of farmer suicide in the country, with a figure crossing 1 lakh in 2019. Now, what are the impact of suicides? Suicide leads to loss of sole breadwinner in the family, window burdened with the new responsibilities as a sole of breadwinner. It causes a lot of psychological distress to family. There is an increase in social stigma, impact on children's education, impact on families, moves from farm labor to permanent labor, etc. Now, what are the governments can do? Addressing root cause, what government can do for the farmers? Like bank credit to all farmers with adequate scale of finance, effective crop insurance to cover all crops and all farmers, inclusion of tenant farmers in all support system. Then what are the next and last topic are what are the policy response? The government had felt that one more green revolution is required. This has been given the name of the second green revolution in order to solve the problem of agrarian crisis. In 2004, under the chairmanship of Ms. M.S. Swaminathan, National Commission on Farmer was formed. It gave the suggestion that new paths should be found for etc. development of horticulture, development of activities, a right to agriculture, etc. In order to give new life to agriculture, the government has made a 5 points agricultural renewal plan which has the following components. Improving the health of soil is which help will be taken from agricultural universities, KVK, etc. There will be improvement is water supply and there will be better water demand management. Better water demand management. Farmers will be provided insurance and credit facilities. Farmers will be given help to adopt new agricultural technology so that net income per hectare increased. It was also suggested that the process of market reform should be started. By this from production to the market, every step should proceed in the planned manner. Now, conclusion is that in conclusion we can say that India is passing through an agrarian crisis, and in order to come out from this second green revolution can be an effective step. Now, thank you. Have a nice day.